I'm a 39-year-old man living in Michigan, and this is a story of the first and last time I experienced sleep paralysis. I had dated someone who dealt with sleep paralysis and night terrors, so I was aware of what it entailed. However, you can never truly understand the dread until you experience it yourself. It felt like a lucid dream. For a long time afterward, I debated whether it was a real event or not. It was the middle of the night. I'd been asleep but was now lying propped up in bed at an angle, with pillows behind my back. Although I'm a grown man, I still sleep with a nightlight. I had a Himalayan salt rock lamp on my nightstand, emitting a warm orange glow. As my senses came about, I realized that even though I was sitting up a bit, I had zero motor function in my body. I was paralyzed from head to toe. This alone was a terrifying notion. As someone who has been blessed with relatively good health through the years, not being able to move was shocking, to say the least. Upon this realization, I began to take stock of my surroundings, and as I scanned the room, I saw him. My bedroom is part of an addition to my home, giving it a rather oblong shape. My bed was pushed into the corner on one side of the room. On the other side, out of reach of the glowing nightlight, stood a shadow man. I would describe him the same way many others have described shadow people. He was nothing more than a silhouette, but he was darker than all the surrounding darkness. He stood tall with no features at all, but somehow I could feel his non-existent eyes fixated on me. He never moved, just stood there staring at me vacantly. Instant terror washed over me. I can sense his malice and hostility. It felt like he wanted to hurt me. My body went into fight or flight mode, and my adrenaline surged, but there was no moving. I remember trying to will my arms to function, but it was as if they weighed 10,000 pounds. I could not budge them. My consciousness was my only tool. I wanted to scream at the entity. I kept trying to yell, "This is a house of God. You are not welcome here." But it was as if my voice was caught in my throat. Trying to urge the words from my mouth was met with defeat over and over again. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, it was over. Like a spell had been lifted. I gasped in a huge breath. My body seemed to tense and hug the bed's mattress. I could move again. I sat up all the way, and my head darted around, frantically looking for the shadow figure. It was gone. But it hadn't disappeared. It didn't dissolve into thin air. It was merely there one second and not there the next. My heart was beating rapidly, and I took in very deep breaths. I laid back in bed and tried to calm myself. That was a terrifying dream, I thought. But then again, was it? It didn't feel like I had been dreaming. My dreams are usually pretty bizarre. They're never in a typical setting from my life, like a bedroom. It didn't feel like I had woken up from sleep. You know how you typically have that feeling, coming from dreamland to the waking world. That sense of clarity that you're back in reality. I didn't have that at all. I didn't wake up and open my eyes. It was just as if the event had finished, and now I was lying in bed alone. It was the oddest feeling and stuck with me for weeks after. Eventually, I decided it was not a dream at all. It just felt too real. And I had to wonder if the warm glow from my salt rock lamp was the only thing that night that kept the shadows at bay. I was at my friend's house, just lying in bed as usual, when something happened that I couldn't explain. and it scared me to the point where I didn't even understand what was going on anymore. My friend lives far out of town in a sketchy area. Not sketchy in the usual sense, but in a way associated with witchcraft and a known cult. It was around 2 a.m. when I was laying in bed, still awake, or so I thought. I was so unbelievably tired I could barely keep my eyes open. Just as I was in that state of being half asleep and somewhat conscious, I was abruptly woken up by scratching on the window. This is where it gets confusing. As I woke up, or at least I thought I did, I looked around the room. The TV was on, the air conditioner was on, and the room was dimly lit by the gray screen of the TV. I could see that this was not my room, but my friend's room. Yet, for some reason, I thought it was my room, and that the scratching was my cat, who I usually let in that way at home. There was no noise, just the scratching and what sounded like a bear trying to meow. I ignored it and started to doze off again, thinking I'd let my cat in later since she usually wants to go out again in a minute, so I rolled over to sleep. I started to fall asleep again, but after a minute of light scratching and strange noises, I was woken up again by banging. I woke up to the TV, fan, air conditioner, and now banging on the window. For some reason, I still hadn't grasped that this was not my room and that this was clearly not my cat. Annoyed, but not scared or worried, I rolled onto my back and stared at the ceiling. Still drowsy and about to fall asleep when the banging got even more aggressive. I woke up again to the room full of sounds, but still didn't move. I tried to ignore the sounds coming from the window, still thinking it was just my cat. Eventually, the banging got so aggressive, it now sounded like a full-grown man trying to rip the window open, clawing at anything to get in. Then, it started to speak. Not talk, like a human, but speak. It's hard to explain, but it was like something mimicking a human voice. Slow, scratchy, dragging out its words. It kept saying, "Emily, let me in." Even speaking my name. "Emily, let me in." For some reason, I still wasn't scared. I still thought this was my room, my window, and my cat. I was aware of what was going on, but I wasn't scared. I was confused. It kept speaking the same phrase, "let me in," but also kept asking for something. Something like, "Are you still going to give it to me? Emily, let me have it. Give it to me. Let me in." Even though I wasn't scared or fully grasping the situation, I was confused about what it was talking about. Still thinking I was talking to my cat, I was confused about what it wanted and what it said I was going to give it. About to speak back to the thing outside, I had no idea what it was talking about or what I supposedly promised to give it. But the only words that came to my mind were, "I was, but not now." Even though I wasn't scared, nor was I grasping the whole situation, something in me told me not to talk to it, or I simply couldn't get the words out. By now, it had been maybe 3 minutes. I wasn't scared and still didn't realize I wasn't at my house. After about 4 minutes of lying in bed, ignoring the scratches, sounds, and words, everything became loud and aggressive. Whatever it was no longer just banging on the window. It sounded like it was trying to rip the window off the wall entirely. The sound was like a full-grown man running and slamming himself into the window and the wall outside the room, ripping at the seams in the window, trying to get in while still screaming, "Emily, let me in. You said you were going to give it to me. Will you give it to me now?" No longer resembling the sound of a human or any animal. This is when I had enough. Still thinking it was my cat, for some reason only God knows why I wasn't realizing. The sounds were so aggressive and loud, it sounded like things were being ripped out of the wall outside. The only thing I could think of was my cat was going to mess up the air conditioner, so I needed to let her in the back door. As I sat up from the bed, it was like my consciousness woke up. Even though I was already awake, in an instant the whole room was darker and quieter. No sounds were coming from the window. The only things I could hear were the fan, the air conditioner, and the person next to me breathing. This is when the fear set in. As I looked around, even though I had been looking around the minutes prior, I finally realized that this was not my room. There was no back door, and that couldn't possibly be my cat outside. I froze, terrified now of the noises I was hearing outside, finally realizing that everything that just happened might have been a dream. But I never felt like I woke up. Nothing ever changed. 1 minute I was lying on my back, listening to all the sounds, eyes wide open, staring at the roof. Then I sat up, and suddenly everything was different. I never opened my eyes. I never had the feeling that I had just been asleep. Now extremely horrified and frozen in place, I stopped and listened for anything outside. Moving, scratching, an animal noise of some sort. Just trying to understand what the heck just happened. After 30 minutes of quietly listening and hearing nothing, I quietly and slowly lay back down, pulling the blanket up under my chin and staring at the cup and the nightstand. About an hour went by in quietness. Nothing scary, nothing out of the ordinary. I started to doze off. By this time, it was around 3, almost 4 a.m. I was back to back with my friend, and I started to relax a little. Maybe it was just a tree hitting the window in the wind. Maybe I had just smoked too much before I went to sleep. Now extremely exhausted, I closed my eyes and fell asleep. I couldn't have been asleep for more than 5 minutes when I heard the most gut-wrenching scream of my life. Not a girl, not a boy, not a human, and not an animal, just a scream. It woke me up, but I wasn't awake. The room was pitch black. I couldn't move my arms or my legs. The only thing I could do was try to look around and breathe. As soon as I woke up, I could no longer hear anything except a slow creaking of the floor by the TV and a small click. Now relaxing completely, thinking that my friend was awake and had just turned the TV off, I went to look, but I couldn't move. I realized that the room wasn't dark, I just couldn't open my eyes. As I heard the floor creak and footsteps coming closer, still thinking it was my friend, I wasn't worried. That is, until I heard a noise from the window. I no longer heard the steps coming closer, but a crying sound. Not someone crying, not an animal crying, but someone trying to sound like one of the two. Whatever it was, it sounded in a massive amount of pain. Low, groaning, and whining, with a scratchy, deep voice that almost echoed. My heart sank. The previous noises hadn't scared me, but these new noises made it hard to breathe. Still completely frozen and terrified, no longer even thinking about who was just standing in the corner of the room, I focused only on what was outside. That's when I felt movement behind me, my friend rolling over. As soon as I felt that, I realized my friend was still in the bed and not up. Thinking he had heard the noises too and had rolled over to see what was going on, I relaxed a little. Still hearing the noises, I expected him to say something, but he didn't. He just rolled over and put his arm on me. His touch was like a trigger. My eyes shot open immediately, and I couldn't move again. That's when everything went silent. I quickly ripped the blanket off and sat up immediately, darting my head towards the TV. Realizing that the TV was still on, showing the classic Roku screen, I turned my head to the window and stared for what felt like forever. Nothing. There was nothing. No sound, no light, nothing. After that, I was genuinely terrified. I stared at the ceiling until the sun came up. Only then did I eventually fall asleep. I don't know what I dreamt about after that. The next morning, I told my friend about it. He told me he hadn't heard a single thing but was worried because he had never experienced anything like that. He mentioned that his mother had engraved Bible scriptures and verses at the base of the house and blessed all the doors and windows. After telling him what had happened, he seemed to make sense of it. Something was trying to get into the house, and it knew I was the weak link. Something was trying to get me to let it in. Something his mom was trying to keep out. This happened last night, and the whole day I've been paranoid, unable to shake the feeling that someone is watching me. I don't know what this means or what to do. I worked in the radiology department at a hospital in Cardiff, Wales, UK, for about 3 years as an admin and clerical officer before getting promoted to work in medicine. During those 3 years, I saw many things, ranging from patients dying in the MRI scanners to patients having an X-ray for inserting a meat thermometer into their urethra. Nights always seemed the craziest. One time, a patient came in with armed police after an altercation involving a knife in the middle of the city center. Coincidentally, the person he had the altercation with was also having an X-ray, which caused a second altercation right in front of me. Chairs were thrown, a trash bin or two, and even a wheelchair. So, I've seen things, some funny, some stressful, some sad, and many bonkers. But this one night was different. Something scary happened. I would start a night shift at about 19 o'clock and work until 8:30 the next morning. This was the standard night shift for our department. We would usually do 3 nights in a row before having 4 days off. After the third night, you were ready to sleep for a week. The strange thing was, this was my first night of the 3, so I was not tired at all. It started off normal. I arrived at the department, took over from the day staff, and logged into my PC. During this time, we usually set up our phones or tablets to watch movies or the latest TV series, since there would be a lot of downtime between patients. As I said, the first few hours were uneventful, just your average run-of-the-mill night in radiology. Then it came to my break. Before I tell you more, I should probably explain the layout of this hospital. It's the largest hospital in Wales, a teaching hospital, and it's quite old. The best way to get from A to B in this hospital is through what we call the tunnels or the catacombs. These consist of very dimly lit corridors, old abandoned rooms, tunnels, and other creepy, decrepit areas. The morgue is also found in these corridors, so it's not a nice place to be during the day, let alone the middle of the night. But it's the quickest way to get around if you're staff. There have always been rumors and stories of strange things happening in these tunnels. Some people say they've seen ghosts in old-fashioned porter uniforms taking wheelchairs to pick up patients. Others say they've seen shadows following them out of the corner of their eyes. One person even claimed they were attacked by someone wearing an old nurse's uniform from the 1970s. This place is creepy even at the best of times, but it never really fazed me. I'd been down there hundreds of times before, and the worst experience up to this point was having a sluice pipe drip human waste on my head, which was a horror show in itself. But tonight would be different. Something altogether different. And maybe not even of this physical world. As I said, it was a very quiet night. I had been watching the latest series of One Piece because I'm a geek. During my downtime, a radiographer or radiology technician from my American friends out there came to take over and cover me for my break. I decided to go to the 5th floor where the sanctuary, a multi-faith chapel, was located. On a night shift, it was one of the most peaceful places in the hospital. But to get there, I had to walk through the tunnels to reach the nearest elevator. I set off on my journey, which usually took about 15 minutes. I scanned my keycard at the main entrance to the tunnels and proceeded to walk through. 2 minutes in, I started to feel like someone was walking behind me. Being a busy hospital and with the tunnels acting like a highway, I didn't think anything of it. Suddenly, I heard panting, like someone trying to catch their breath after an intense run. So I turned around to check and saw nothing. It was a bit strange, but I thought it was nothing. Maybe just one of the pipes above my head creaking or generating pumping. So I carried on walking, but I kept feeling like someone or something was watching me and walking behind me. Out of sheer confusion and fear, I missed my turn towards the elevators and found myself in a large section of the tunnels I had never been in before. It was littered with old stretchers, beds, hospital furniture, and equipment. Some of this stuff was over 50 years old, maybe older, just left to decay in a dark, smelly, decrepit, and dusty corridor. This really started to creep me out because, in all this confusion, I realized I was lost. It almost felt like I had fallen into the back rooms. Everything looked the same. I could feel a tightening in my chest and the start of a panic attack. I remember clutching my chest and running down a corridor, trying to find a signpost or something to tell me where I was. The sense that something was watching me grew stronger. Suddenly, I felt something hit my arm with force, almost like someone using a baseball bat. I remember falling to the ground, pulling myself across the floor towards a cold, dusty wall, and looking around frantically, trying to find an explanation for what had just hit me. Then something caught my eye. It was almost like a black mist with glowing red eyes. It was about 20 meters away from me, just hovering in the middle of the corridor. Was this thing the thing that had been stalking me the entire time? I got back up and sprinted. I ran down what felt like 100 different corridors until I found a housekeeper, janitor. He asked me what was wrong because I looked pale, but I couldn't get any words out. He then grabbed me by the arms with a firm grip and said, "Did you see it too?" That was the last time I ever stepped foot in the tunnels. To this day, I hear rumors of strange things. I'm not sure what I saw that night. Maybe I was tired, maybe I was stressed, or maybe it was something else. Why else would the janitor ask me if I had seen it too? What else is down there? Well, I can tell you one thing for sure. I won't be going to find out.